Hello everyone, I'm Dan Jacobs for the Brilliant Business Podcast, and today we've got Petra Zink. So, hello Petra.
Hey Dan, nice to be here.
Amazing. Do you want to give us a quick debrief as to what it is that you do?
Absolutely. I work with executives, entrepreneurs, and experts and help them turn what they know into scalable authority assets so that they can monetize it in multiple ways.
So tell us what that means, because there are lots of consultants and people who would listen to this call who think I'm a specialist in something, and typically what we do, we work with billable hours, so we've got 8 hours in the day, or maybe 12 if you stretch it. And that's as much work as you can fit in there. But you offer something different. What is that?
That's right. My specialization is how can we systemize, package, and then monetize your IP in different ways? Meaning, how can we turn what you know into products? It could be a digital product, it could be a physical product, it could be a service. It could be a keynote that you can offer to different audiences in multiple ways. And with that, you can build a portfolio career and multiple income streams without burning out, without trying to run constantly on the hamster wheel and reinvent yourself. And this is what so many, especially knowledge professionals, often misunderstand. They think, I've got 30 plus years experience in corporate doing X, Y, Z. I can easily become a consultant. And that's not the case, especially in the age of AI, where a lot of knowledge can already be outsourced and automated and artificially produced. It doesn't come down to how much you know or how much experience you have. It's how can you package what you know and develop a system that creates most effective and most efficiently the results that your clients want. And this is where signature frameworks come in that also help you to position yourself. And instead of being one of many, you become the one and only in your category.
So who would be a typical consultant? What sorts of skills do you work with?
I always say it's technical skills. So anything that you learn and or experience. We work with accountants, we work with communications professionals, we work with facilitators. Anyone who makes a living by selling their expertise through a service. So we don't necessarily work with product-based businesses, but more service-based businesses that are based on expertise. And often what we also don't realize is the more senior we become, including setting up our business, the less it comes down to how good we are with our technical skills. That has become the foundation. That's like the entry ticket to play the game. What it comes down to is how can we now position you as the go-to in your field, which makes business development, sales, and partnerships a lot more feasible.
So this is with your business Impact, is with Triple C.
Yes.
What does that business do?
That business is working with those executives, entrepreneurs, and experts on exactly that. And the Triple C stands for my framework. So when I developed it, a lot of my back then candidates, because I came from a recruitment background, they said, I don't know what I want to do next, but I want to make an impact. And clearly, also when you want to position yourself as the future candidate or somebody who wants to get hired in an organization, it comes down to how well are you positioned compared to everyone else. And the same obviously applies in business. We always go up against competitors and other service providers. And I thought, I don't know what that even means. Like, what does impact mean to a 22-year-old versus a 65-year-old? Clearly, we've got different ideas. And I thought, what if there is a way how we can clarify what you actually stand for and what you want and what makes you different to everyone else? Because then you've got the tools to communicate in a way that resonates with your decision maker. And with that, you can commercialize, which is why impact has the 3 C's, because it follows my own personal brand monetization framework.
So that monetization framework is what people can apply as consultants.
That's right. And then over the years, I've developed the trusted authority framework, which is basically the next layer on top of it. So once we know what you actually stand for, you have got a communications and content strategy around it. We have your marketing and brand assets developed. We've got an idea what your signature framework is. How can you now take it up a step? How can you also influence with or without the title? Because especially around 2020, 21, we all know what happened. The questions all of a sudden changed from how can I get ahead to how can I get ahead without being in the office all the time? How can I influence and make things happen also when I don't want to be a full-time employee anymore? We've seen layoffs, we've seen voluntary redundancy packages that people took. We have seen people simply resigning because they realized they are in the wrong job and or in the wrong career and or in the wrong business. So the conversations have shifted. And I thought that's an interesting question. In a nutshell, what the trust authority framework is all about is how can you become now a translator of your expertise, but also stay relevant by you consistently translating what you know and how that impacts your decision makers. So often we deal with commercial decision makers rather than with technical decision makers. And they often don't speak our language because they don't necessarily have our background. And their KPIs are different. So how can we get buy-in? How can we influence to make things happen simply by addressing what they actually want and knowing how we can deliver on that promise?
How do you get someone to trust that what they know is valuable enough to become an asset that people would buy?
Love this question. It comes down to having actual proof. Now, it starts with usually a personal experience or transformation. You've achieved a certain education level, you've gotten some experience. So, this is like the personal side of things. The next part is how can you then turn it into a process or a system? And when you develop that and rinse and repeat that a few times to get some results, then you also have some social proof or external validation. And this is where we can then see, does what you have to offer actually have value, and is that solidified with examples and case studies and experiences from the past? Because what we do not want to have is to make up things or to manufacture frameworks for the sake of it, because what's the point, especially if they're not proven yet? I can't theoretically come up with how to do XYZ if I've never done XYZ and or have never worked in that field. So this is where we do have to go back in the career history and see where are some of those transformation results that we can use for our framework. And this is how we go about it.
So one thing that I've seen that you're a specialist in is those nuggets in someone's career that maybe they don't value themselves. You're able to pick that and outset, and actually that thing that you've done over here, that's really something valuable. Now, how is it that you've come to be that astute? How have you become the detective for those magical nuggets that someone may not value themselves?
I think it's a bit born with and learned. My brand archetype is a magician, which means I can see things that others can't see. So new product development or innovation is very easy for me because I already have a vision for that and I don't have to think hard about it. I can come up with new ideas very, very quickly. On the other hand, I'm not really good with attention to detail. Hard for me. I am not good at it. So, every strength has the trade-offs. But at the same time, people often, there's a saying, you can't see the label when you're inside the jar. And people often cannot see what they're naturally good at, but also what's valuable in the market because they're too close to it. And often we also have this proximity bias to think everyone knows how to do X, Y, Z, or everyone is good at doing ABC, simply because they are good at that and they're naturally good at it, whereas others are struggling with it. And I did a workshop literally just yesterday, and one of the ladies said she wants to transition careers. Currently, she is in childcare, and that's just so easy for her, but she wants to do something more marketing related. And I said to her, this is not easy. Like, I could not survive a day in childcare, not if my life depends on it, not what I am good at. Where she said, oh, I've been doing it for so long, it's so good. Simply picking up on that, meaning what do you need to bring to the table to manage a child? You need to have patience, you need to have creativity, you need to be able to be a strong communicator, you're a natural leader. Like, there are so many associated traits and skills that you have to bring to make this profession a success. And you can also use those skills into different industries. Fast forwarding now to 26 and beyond, we see that we've got 5+ different careers. And in those 5 different careers, 17+ jobs. And we stay in a role for 1.2 to 1.8 years, which means simply doing more of what we've done and think that's the only thing that I can do limits our options straight away, especially when more and more jobs and tasks are getting automated.
Why is it in the age of AI that someone would choose to use a consultant rather than ChatGPT?
Excellent question again. And this is where a lot of consultants are struggling with. We have seen layoffs again. Even big consultancies have tightened their budgets and have made redundancies across the border. With that said, there will always be a demand for consultants because what AI cannot do, at least not at this point, is judgment, but also contextualizing information. It can give you all the knowledge and the information that it can gather, but it can't make sense to your particular situation and the context in it. And every organization has slightly different politics and team dynamics and requirements. AI doesn't know that. And eventually it may pick up on that more. However, the judgment on what good looks like, even style, it's not something that AI is really good at. And obviously now there's been a lot of conversation about the AI slop. So the quality of the output is going down. Now, clearly, who is to pick up the slack now? Humans again.
Yeah, you see that on social media, isn't it? I mean, every second or third post has got a long dash in it, or saying things get done quietly. It's like,
I
well,
know. What is this quietly? Just do it properly.
exactly. So it's a question of trust then, isn't it?
Yes.
So people want to trust what they're doing. And does a human give them that better than what AI would?
In some cases, yes. And also, it depends again on the context. If I just want to have a straight forward answer, of course, I can use AI. It's a lot cheaper. But what consultancy have been pulled up on it is that more junior consultants, especially, have just copied and pasted AI generated reports and handed it to clients, including sentences like, do you want to turn it into a PDF? Do you want, not even double checking. That level of laziness is not forgivable, especially if you charge $100,000+ for this report. So this is where humans become irrelevant because everyone can copy and paste. Our value comes through judgment. Is this correct? Is this suitable for this particular audience? Do I need to change words or language if we're talking more to a technical audience and so forth? 100% using AI because it does accelerate our output, and it can also certainly refine our quality, and relying 100% on it, that is no.
Yeah, so I work in engineering consultancy and we use AI quite extensively. One of the things we always say is that, it's like Wikipedia, isn't it? It's a really great reference source and it's a really great tool, but you're accountable for what gets said there. You as a human, you as the person who signs that deliverable, it's your signature on there, not ChatGPT or
Absolutely.
Wikipedia.
And it's also a great thinking partner. Like, I constantly think out loud and say, I want to talk about this and I want to use this example, but how do I make sense out of that without diluting things? So the more direct we can be with what we actually want, the easier it is to get an output. But it also requires critical thinking in the first place as to what is it that I want to achieve? Who is it for? What's the ideal outcome? Like, the basics of how we actually deliver good quality work, that doesn't go away, especially when we can't give the proper prompts, just get random content and very mainstream insights, and nobody pays for that anymore.
I want to relay a sort of experience I had, and I don't want to say with which LLM because their law firm is stronger than mine. But I was doing some research and I asked for some academic references and it provided a list of academic references. And I was really impressed. I thought this is fantastic because it's made my research so much easier. But then I went into the academic reference because I wanted to go and actually read it and not just quote it. And they were completely fictitious. So it had mentioned a correct institute, but the detail behind that was just completely made up. So I think there's a real danger that when we trust AI too much, we end up in a situation where we really lose credibility. Now, a human coming in, obviously doing that, hopefully be a human coming in obviously will be more of a trusted authority. So can you tell us more about your trusted authority framework and what that means?
Absolutely. Working also with a lot of technical experts in the tech and digital industries for 10 years, what I've seen is that people often think they can get ahead by sounding very smart and throwing all the jargon in because this is what their language is all about. However, a commercial decision maker, especially a C-suite leader, A, usually doesn't have that level of detail or knowledge, and B, don't have the time to translate in their own head. And the real reason why I was successful when I got into recruitment without having ever worked in recruitment, coming from a marketing background, was because I just asked a lot of clarifying questions, simply because I didn't know anything. So I had to rely on other people's input for me to learn, basically. And because I still didn't quite understand the technical terms and I didn't want to be uncovered that I actually don't know anything, I translated it in very simple terms. And I had also been a marketing department for the past 12 years prior to that. So I knew how businesses are structured, how teams work together. And I said, you know how you want to build XYZ here? Well, Johnny over there has done A, B, and C. And what he could do is something similar in here. I literally talked everyday language and I became the translator. And this is how my candidates, very senior, very technical, sometimes very nerdy, and I love them, but they wouldn't have often been able to even get an interview if somebody wouldn't have kind of opened the door and presented what they could actually do for this particular client. So the idea of the trust authority is, how can you learn to become the translator? Firstly, of your skills. And often we focus on, I've got 20 years experience, I've got 3 degrees and 2 awards. And you're like, great, I guess. What does that mean? Is it good? Is it bad? Like, I don't know what that even means. And if somebody else comes and charges 20 grand less, I'll take them, because why would I? Wouldn't I? There's no point of differentiation. However, if I know what I'm actually good at in terms of the results that I can bring based on my experience and background and expertise and also my personality, I can be a lot more intentional with seeking out the right opportunities, but also speaking their language. And clients, decision makers, they want to know, do you get me? Have you been there before? Do you understand what kind of challenges we are facing? And then how do you actually help us? And this is where framework or a process comes in, that comes back from connecting the dots from our past. And then, do I even like working with you? And this is an underrated element in any kind of economic landscape. You can be the best at what you do, but if you're hard to work with, people will not choose you, because we spend so much time with somebody, or even being a keynote speaker. So you don't even have to be working somewhere full time. If you're hard to work with, if you are not reliable to respond, if you're late to meetings, you are not going to be chosen. There will be somebody else. So in a nutshell, how can you be the easiest go-to that your decision makers say yes to?
Question around hard to work with. That's an interesting one. I think of Simon Sinek talking about, have you seen that sort of whiteboard video where he does with the Navy SEALs? Where they talk about, you want to be able to trust someone. So the competence of that person is worth much less to the extent of trusting them. So you want to be able to trust someone much more than what they're very good at. But how do you determine that? Because on paper, someone would say, these are my qualifications, and people mention qualifications, but what you're really looking for is competence and also someone who fits into their team. But those last two things are quite hard to judge. How do you identify that when you're recruiting someone?
It comes down to asking clarifying questions and having the candidate explaining how they actually solved the problem, rather than, oh yeah, we did that. That's always a red flag. It's like, who is we to start with, and how much contribution did you have in that particular project? Were you a note taker? It's not we anymore, and you have actually not done anything. Or, was it a consultancy who actually did the work, or an agency? So sometimes in-house marketing teams, and I can talk about that because I was part of that too, they work with agency, and then they said, oh, we developed creative campaigns. No. We briefed, we approved, and we paid. In-house, we actually never developed any creative as such. So it's a big difference between asking the right and clarifying questions, what that actually means, to then being able to translate that to say, yes, you've actually got the right qualifications, versus you've probably ChatGPT'd your CV and you've got no idea what you're talking about. There are research about it, and clients also told me about it, that they have had so many candidates through the door where their CV looks incredible. And then they interview them and ask them a few case study questions, and they just crumble. They have no answer because they've actually never done it. Crazy.
Yeah, my brother in South Africa runs his own business, and he said to me, I should always recruit someone who's bad in interviews, because it means they've never been to many. And you kind of
Yes.
think you also get the opposite, don't you? I mean, someone who's a professional interview attender.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
experience that I've had from my past was, we had two candidates for a job. It was quite a specialist role. And the one guy came in scruffy with a torn paper CV. And the other guy came in polished with a suit on, and he had the sort of lever arch file with all the right things. So, we recruited him, and he was a nightmare.
Mm.
And I think he lasted a week or so, but it was interpersonal stuff. I think he had the skills, the technical skills, but not the skills necessary to work in a team.
Mm-hmm.
And he rubbed people up the wrong way. Eventually he left, and we went back to the other guy, and he ended up being there for years and years. The second guy became like an absolute institution in the organization. So it highlighted to me how easy it is to be played by someone who really knows the interview game.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So how do you say you secure rare talent that others miss? Is that all through these questions and so on, or is there more that you can identify? Because sometimes the other challenge with people is that they, like you said with the analogy with the jar, they don't see the value in themselves. So when we're looking for the team player and those special people, beyond just the questions, what character traits would we be looking for in people?
Well, in this day and age, it's definitely adaptability, because people try to have reliability and consistency, but the world doesn't work like that anymore. And this is also why titles are not as relevant anymore, because titles were associated with authority, and titles and hierarchy and structures, they worked in predictable environments. And now every day we face a different challenge, a different problem. We see a new social media platform popping up, different algorithms, like literally nothing is the same within 24 hours. So thinking I do whatever I'm doing for the next 10 years is literally your way out to be irrelevant straight away. So it comes down to, if you were in this situation and all of a sudden the budget gets cut and you don't have access to this, and, just see how people think in that situation and how responsive they are, how easy they deal with change, how they go about team contribution. If you are done with your work and somebody else has to stay back because their work isn't done, but it's not your area of expertise, what do? Go home because you're not getting paid for it? Stay on? What are the ways how you solve everyday problems that may not have anything to do with your technical expertise? Because in the second you get interviewed, the chances that you tick at least a few boxes, they're already there. So it comes down to identifying, how does the person think? How do they make decisions? And how would they get on with others in the team? And at the same time, also understanding the company culture from, are they quite conservative and they actually need somebody who can wake them up a little bit? So this is what the missing link is. Or would that be a disruptor because the company wants to stay very conservative? So there's also two sides to the coin, and especially recruitment. It is quite a difficult job, even though people think it's the easy thing to do. You just match a CV with a job description and good to go. But it's a complex sales process because it's a double-sided marketplace. You need to understand both sides, and you find a way that suits both. Of course, the candidate wants as much money as they possibly can. The company wants to pay as little as they possibly can. Like, there's always a trade-off, and you are the conduit who tries to bring those parties together.
So I had a role previously where I used to do a lot of recruitment. So we'd get a big project in, I'd do lots of recruitment, the people would come in, the project would finish, they'd leave, and then we'd start the whole cycle again. So a lot of my role was recruiting, and I found that there was a trait, I'm generalizing now, but it seemed to me that when I was recruiting men or interviewing men, they would always they'd go like, "Oh, I can do 80% of the job. Yeah, I'm fine for that." And you'd get a really strong woman candidate in, who I believe was really strong, but they would say, "Oh no, there's 10%. I can't do that, so it's not for me." Is that something that you see with people where there's a difference between how people perceive their value based on the CV?
100%. I can't tell you how many times it happened that I reached out to a female for various reasons. Sometimes they were just the most qualified for what I was looking for. Sometimes, yes, there are some criteria from organizations to say we want the next hire to be female. It still happens because of quotas, but also because of genuine balance requests. Like, one of my favorite clients, they only have one female in a team of 16. And they said, whatever happens next, it needs to be a female. We've got way too much bro energy, in Australian terms. And I get it. So it's not we have to tick a box and, just get anyone in that we fulfill the criteria. Not at all. So they are genuinely looking for diverse thinking and personalities. With that said, 100% females underestimate usually their capabilities. And if they don't tick 120% of the boxes, they're not going for it. Whereas guys, 30-40% and think they're overqualified. So there is a
Yeah, I'll
different
give it a go.
perception.
Yeah,
I'll do it anyway,
yeah, we'll figure it out
But
as I go along. Yeah.
yeah, but guess who gets the role? It's not the female. And this is why I often say you can be the best at what you do, but if people don't know about it, and or if you don't put yourself into those positions where you can actually show it and communicate it, you've got no chance. It doesn't matter how good you are. And also, especially now with technical skills becoming a lot more level because of AI and tools like that, it's not that what differentiates you anymore. And in many situations, when you progress and you step from individual contributor to now partner, for example, in a professional services firm, you are now responsible for winning the work, not just for doing the work. And that's a big mindset shift too, because for the last 15 or 20 years, those people have been rewarded and been promoted for doing really good work. And now all of a sudden they have to do something different. And not doing that, what they've been rewarded for so many years, is a bit of a, I don't know what you mean kind of thing. So they often fall back into what's comfortable for them, doing the work rather than putting themselves out, selling, expecting, building pipelines. But yeah, this is still a reason why a lot of males are in leadership positions. And often it's also a proactive choice. Unfortunately, / fortunately, depending how you see it, there is a biological clock that is ticking for women. So there's only so many years for women to give birth, which means there is a career break. And obviously that's not the best situation in a career. And there's great examples to manage both. But a lot of women say actually they don't want to go back into this high pressure, fast paced environment. So it's also a proactive choice to change their career aspirations after a major event like a child.
So what do we need to say to women to get them to, is it just a case of belief in themselves, or, is it a question of them needing to feel comfortable in the workplace? I mean, what needs to change for us to get the best of women? Because I feel sometimes there's this huge, immense pool of talent that humanity has out there within the female workforce, which, we don't necessarily get the best out of.
It is a mix of, obviously both parties need to bring something to the party. From the candidate's perspective, yes, it is a belief thing, but it's also a skill thing, because selling yourself, positioning yourself, communicating your value, that's a skill. It's a hard skill, but it's not something that we get taught in traditional education. So of course, when we don't have exposure to others who are really good communicators, or have role models, or have a coach who can actually show what kind of blind spots we have, those people will not get ahead and wonder why, or they simply don't want to progress because it is high pressure. There is a lot of politics involved. There is a lot of travel requirements, which often doesn't necessarily align with a lifestyle choice either. And then from a company's perspective, we see over and over again, not just from females' perspective, but also from males, that flexibility is one of their most important decision-making factors, meaning being able to work either remotely or hybrid or on their own time and location is a massive reason why they say yes or no to a job. So now the pendulum is swinging back again, that employees have to come back to the offices, which is quite a disruptor for many who have built a lifestyle somewhere else because it's more affordable, because for whatever reason, a family now having to even move interstate, like we see it in Australia, a lot of interstate candidates have taken on remote roles and the companies pull them back now. So they think it's a lot cheaper to live in this state, and I can still make the income that I make in this state, which is higher. So I've got the best of both worlds, but it's getting less and less. So yeah, a company also has to rethink, what are my incentives? How do I actually keep talent within the organization by providing them opportunities to progress, not necessarily just upwards, but also sideways. And from a personal perspective, candidates also need to take control and responsibility over their own progression. HR or their manager is not responsible to say, you should do course X, Y, Z, and then you get a promotion here. The world doesn't work like that anymore, especially not in a more project-based environment.
So Petra, we've spoken about diversity a bit, and I think it's important, obviously, for companies to demonstrate that they're diverse. But how important is it for an organization to value the diverse thinking of someone rather than just the demographics of what they look like?
This is a key to innovate, but also to see blind spots. And what companies and or society often doesn't realize is diversity comes from having different lenses to the same topic because of different upbringing, because of a different professional training. So let's say legal, so without looking into demographics whatsoever, the legal department has a very different lens to a topic because of their KPIs and what they get measured on, versus the procurement team, versus the marketing team. So simply bringing departments together can create diverse insights into a topic. And of course, adding diverse backgrounds in terms of ages and cultural backgrounds also help us to see what should we not say because it could offend a demographic that we are not as familiar with, or what are the young kids saying? Should we introduce 6 and 7 in our communication, or is this already old news because it's been 48 hours old? Small things like that just creates different ways of thinking, but it still comes down to the leader being also a strong facilitator of those thoughts. I can be a very diverse team and still not have a value creation based on that. If I don't have the opportunity to actually bring my thoughts and insights in that get then curated in a way that somebody does something with it, it's just what's the point of having a diverse team then? So facilitation skills from a leader to being able to ask more questions, to collect those insights and then make sense based on that. That is where true innovation comes from.
You've mentioned culture, and I think that's something which leaders actively enforce within an organization. So that's created by the behaviors of the leader. Now, what behaviors should a leader implement to allow people from diverse backgrounds to be able to voice views that might be against the conventional thinking within an organization is?
Well, the one and only thing that it really matters is psychological safety, meaning as an employee with an opinion or a voice, I don't have to be worried that I get fired because I say the wrong thing, or somebody laughs at me what a random idea I have, or that people think I'm not suitable enough because I didn't come up with this amazing idea. So anything that could impact their psychological safety in terms of unpredictability of behavior. Same with, I want to know that when I walk into the office, I can expect a certain behavior. It doesn't always need to be, good morning, everyone, let's sing Kumbaya and everyone is amazing. Not every organization works like that and doesn't need to be, but I need to rely on consistent behavior because this is also what builds trust. That it's not one day we are best buddies and I can share with you everything, and the next day you use it against me and stab me in the back, and then the next day you invite me over to a barbecue. That is confusion. So now I'm like, what is coming tomorrow? I'm not quite sure. I've got my backup. And when I'm so focused on my safety, not even physical safety, but psychological safety, I cannot perform and operate at my best. So I'm constantly thinking, could he interpret that as this way? Or I'll double check. So all of a sudden the work slows down, the progress gets slower, and it has ripple effects. This is often what leaders and organizations don't realize. They still think psychological safety is this very touchy feeling topic, but it isn't. It has very much commercial impact on the business.
So we're back to trust again. And it's important, I think, for organizations to understand the extent to which employees need to be able to trust the reactions within a group. Would you say that's the case?
Spot on, especially when there's so much uncertainty. A leader's job and responsibility is to create certainty. And it doesn't mean knowing everything, predicting everything, and promising the world. Far from it. It's about creating a predictable environment that can respond to uncertain situations, events, whatever might happen. Especially emotional regulation is one of those key traits and skills that we often don't talk about. But in the end, a major key account quits or doesn't resign, and we've just lost 60% of our revenue, or we have negative press and we have to deal with that. People are looking at their leader and see how they respond. And if they are manic and frantic and anxious, guess what? Everyone else is doing the same. So of course, leaders are humans and going through exactly the same emotions, but their job is to firstly regulate themselves and then lead the team through that. This is why they are more senior, to be a leader and go first, that others can follow safely. Especially more junior staff who don't necessarily know how to deal with that, who don't have the tools yet to respond to those stress situations. They want to learn, and you can only learn from observing, from seeing and listening what others are saying and how they respond to it. So a leader needs to do exactly that. And this is where interpersonal communication in the end comes back again, and also problem solving. So rather than saying, oh, we need to do X, Y, Z, no. We need to take a step back and ask the question, what got us here? Why is this even happening? Then we can identify what the root cause is. So what we need to do is we need to rationalize the emotions that we're facing, make whatever we're facing more logical, so that the amygdala and our fight, flight, freeze or frown response doesn't kick in and we're literally just standing still and don't do anything, or even worse, do the wrong thing.
There's a big demand on a leader to have a high level of emotional intelligence. I think the challenge is that people get promoted based on their technical experience or or technical expertise or academic knowledge, but they might not necessarily have the emotional intelligence or that EQ quotient to be able to deal with this. So what switch needs to happen with someone when they go from a technical position or knowledge-based position into a leadership position where that emotional intelligence gets a lot more crucial to their role?
I would say they need to be aware of that first, and also realize they didn't get promoted because they were so good at doing the doing. They have shown certain characteristics that led them to the particular position. And also redefining what success looks like for me. Not everyone is actually a born and or developed people leader. Like I used to lead teams and I hated every second of it. It was not something that came easy to me, but I thought, well, that's my more senior career progression. I have to do that. What else is there? And this is why over the years I've refined what leadership actually could look like, depending on your skills and your personality. So yes, people leadership is the most obvious, but it could also be change leadership, which is more focused on communication, on stakeholder management, but not necessarily formal reporting lines that somebody comes to you to get your leave approved and so forth. Then project management. So how can I be across everything and nothing at the same time? And of course, having technical expertise, and then also thought leadership. And this is the category that I have moved into because I feel most comfortable with that, but it also aligns most with where I want to take my career and what success looks like to me. So instead of having 20 people reporting to me, which I had at that time, my current definition of success could be further away from that. The leaner, the meaner the teams, and I love it, just because it's not my strengths. Even supporting leaders through that part or emerging leaders to say, where are you actually most suited and create most value? And it may not be a people leadership position, especially when organizations are not as hierarchical anymore, so that it is clear that when you're here, the next position is the head of, and then you've got, a director role and so forth. How can you move sideways? How can you take on bigger clients? How can you manage bigger budgets? These are also opportunities for us to progress, but as I said, not necessarily up the chain, but sideways.
And in terms of someone managing their emotional intelligence, if someone recognizes that maybe it's a weak point in me, I mean, what are some things that they can do to address that? And I also want to ask that in the context of ego, because someone is maybe promoted into a role that they're not comfortable with. Ego forms a big part of that, and you get the negative behaviors like defensiveness and that sort of thing, which come into that. How does someone develop themselves in that space to be a good leader?
Again, it comes down to being aware that this is the behavior you portray, and either you realize that because you get pushback or people say yes in a meeting and then go away and do something else, so you actually don't influence. So there are certain signs that leadership is not working, also when you have the title and the official authority and people still go away and do something. Or if you get kind of pulled to the side by your senior leader or even by somebody else who picks up on it and suggests a 360 review, for example, to get some collected feedback from others so that we can see how is your perception about yourself and what you contribute versus everyone else's. And that's obviously anonymous. Then we create a really holistic 360-degree view on this particular person. So it's a data-driven decision rather than a gut feeling decision. And we can work on what people really value about you is your problem solving skill. Where they feel not supported is that you don't have time for them and you have constantly closed doors and you're just working and they expect to do the same and so forth. So it's more so addressing what people are already saying, feeling and experiencing, and then work through a plan to improve that. And I also want to address there is a phenomenon called the Peter Principle. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. But what it
Yeah.
basically means is you get promoted to the highest level of incompetence. And it's not often because it just your technical expertise needs to stretch so much. It's about you getting put in a completely different environment that is not suited to your skills and strengths anymore. And that also happened to me. And back then I didn't have language for it. So I just thought, clearly I'm incompetent and I must get out of this industry. But what it means is you get promoted because you've done something really well over and over. And especially early on, it's all about execution. You're not necessarily a strategic thinker or a leader. You just do the doing. That's okay. However, from my background, and as I said to you before, my brand archetype is a magician, so I can see what others can't see. I've always been in product and brand development, and this was just something so easy for me, campaign development. Anyway, my last marketing role was senior, but that also meant not necessarily that much on the ground anymore doing that. I had to manage 18 boards. All of them were male. Maybe there were 2 females across the 18 boards. I had to manage budgets. I had to negotiate suppliers. Everything that you kind of expect in a senior role, but everything that I'm not good at either. So I thought I'm a bad marketer, clearly, because I suck at that particular role and I can see that I don't have an impact anymore. However, it's the different type of marketing that I've kind of, because my perception was, well, this is the more senior role to where you're now. So that's the most logical step that you can take. With that said, that's also about 15 years ago. So back then it was a lot more linear than it is now. And that's the beauty, I guess, that we've got opportunities in 2026 and beyond to rethink what our level of success looks like and what and how we want to shape our career, that it actually aligns with the biggest value that we can bring.
So you've mentioned there that you were in a role and then you didn't feel comfortable with that. But the great news for people is that they can reinvent themselves. So can you tell us how you went about from that position into to where you are now?
Absolutely. Now, the most logical decision that I made at that stage, when I was also put on a performance improvement plan because it was obviously really bad, was I'm not good enough for this industry. I have to get out of here. However, prior to seeing that, I met with a recruiter and hoped that they could place me in another marketing role. And because I was progressing so quickly in my in this senior role, I actually didn't look after any hands-on execution anymore. I managed teams, I managed agencies, I managed budgets. So I didn't have the hands-on skills, especially in the digital marketing and social media space, which had just become a thing. So it was not as easy for me to transition because I kind of slept through those trends. And because as an in-house team, which was quite small, we didn't have the capabilities either. And we did outsource it. So I had never the opportunity to actually learn it. And she said, you know what? I think you would be really good for looking after our marketing desk here. Do you want to become a recruiter? I was like, why would I? I studied marketing. I've got a master's in marketing. I've got 12 years in the industry. No. And then I sat on it. I was like, why not? Like, what does my ego say that keeps me there? But it's often when we invested so much time and effort in something, including a degree, we often don't want to give that up because we've just put too much effort and time and money into it. But it's also the cost of inaction. So what could it actually enable? And because it was such a toxic environment, and long story short, I got a role as a recruitment consultant starting a new desk, and that was digital. And I just started to grow up in that field because I'd never been in a consulting environment. And because I was surrounded by high performing other consultants, I just mimicked them. I wanted to be on the top leaderboard. So it really brought the best out of me. And thankfully, with this kind of kick in the backside that I had in marketing, I would have never experienced that. So in terms of reinventing, it comes down to identifying what is it that I'm already good at? What do people come to me for already? And how can I, not necessarily making a massive move straight away, but how can I tiptoe into this field? How can I start a project? How can I volunteer in this industry? How can I develop my skills with a side hustle? So we have to rethink, how do we actually stay relevant? And do we experience that skill or this industry or this profession as glamorous as we think it is? A lot of my clients want to become public speakers. And I always say, okay, I love it. However, are you interested or are you committed? Because public speaking sounds glamorous. You show up for an hour, you get $10,000, you travel the world. But to get there, you have to have at least 100 no's. You speak for free. You get a lot of negative feedback. There's just, and you have to rehearse constantly. You have to take feedback. There is just so much that goes on in the background that people don't necessarily want. Same with everyone wants six packs, right? But how many people are actually that committed to eat right, to sleep long, to train the right way? Not many. Otherwise, if it would be easy, everyone would do it. So simply experiencing and having hands-on and first-hand experience is what makes a difference between going all in, because yes, actually I want to do that, versus I thought it was better than it is. I might need to do something else.
So that leads me well into another business that you run. So the 360 Talent Company. Can you tell us what you do with that one?
Yes, so it is a talent consultancy working with businesses on all their talent needs and solutions. What it means is we identify what companies' capability is right now. So not just the skills that they've got, but the capability that's implemented in the business. And also, is the capability that they have now the right one for where they want to go? And a lot of companies have digital transformation goals, have sustainability goals. There's so many goals and directions that companies need/want to take, that often the existing skill set and with that the capability in the team is not quite there. And there are so many ways how you can build capability. So firstly, is it a bottleneck of the executive team because there's only one person who can make decision, and that is a hit and miss whether we get it right, and nobody else can actually understand how we make decisions. So we can systemize thought process, decision-making matrices, and simply, again, documenting and systemizing IP that's already happening in organization. So that's one way to build capability. Another way is to build advisory boards on a particular topic that the company is struggling with. So instead of just defaulting to a full-time employee, what would it take to get 3-4 experienced senior professionals who've done that, whatever we want to do before, and meet with them every month, every quarter, whatever it may be, that we can then implement. So this is how we can get short-term but high value capability into our team. And or in some cases, we simply recruit or conduct an executive search.
How important is the direction that a company takes in terms of who you recruit? Because I think very often it's quite hard for a company to articulate what their focus is and what their mission is.
Absolutely. And on top of that, they often have like a shopping list of skills that would require 3 people. But because the budget doesn't allow it, they just mix and match different job descriptions and put it into one new role. So that obviously doesn't work. And then at the same time, not having a clear direction and a vision where the company wants to go certainly impacts it, because it means we have to make short-term decisions. We simply replace one person with the next who's got a suitable and similar skill set. So we're basically just staying in the same lane over and over again without building capability. And it also comes down to, I work with a lot of my one-on-one clients who are leaders on helping them build capabilities in their team, because people get recruited for their skills. But just because I have a skill that I bring to a team doesn't mean the team has the capability. Meaning, how can I share what I know and what I do in a way that others can replicate it? And it doesn't need to be the depth of expertise that I personally have, but it may simply be a checklist. Before we send a website live, these are the criteria that we have to go through. And everyone who needs to approve if a website goes live or not can go through it if we've ticked all the boxes. You know, small things like that makes a massive difference. So it's not dependent on the one particular person and the actual individual. It comes down to, as a team, we know how to make decisions. We have relationships that is not dependent on the one person to make things happen. We have processes. How do we actually problem solve? So the team feels a lot more confident tapping into each other's expertise without going deep, but having a wide understanding.
Yeah, so we're back to trust within the team. So the team trusts each other. And then you've also mentioned that there's the processes that people have documented. But then what about the direction or the purpose of the team? How important is understanding what the company purpose or the team purpose is in the scope of decision making?
It's everything. In a second, an individual can't see their own vision and mission in the company's mission and vision. They're probably not going to stay there for long if they even consider this organization at all. We just want to make a lot of money. Like, I'm not buying into that. I don't want to make you more money when I've got nothing from it. So a company has to be a lot more specific and big in their thinking, that people want to stay back late, that they want to work at night and on weekends, that you've got this discretionary effort because they see that they contribute to something beyond themselves. So painting and communicating a vision so big that everyone can see how they fit in there, but then translating into, how do you personally contribute to the bigger team outcome that then leads us to our mission, is everything.
So people understand that what their work purpose is fits into the company mission.
Whilst also fulfilling their own purpose. If I say, I really want to work with the latest tech and want to always be at the cutting edge of what's happening in AI, and then as a team, we are still using Microsoft 365 as the one and only tech tool and think we are already innovative, I'm probably not going to stay there for a long time. It's, yes, how can you contribute to a mission that's important to you, that you support, whilst also fulfilling your own purpose, what excites you, what you're good at.
How does a leader in an organization get their vision articulated down to a person? Because ideally, you'd almost want to say you want to be able to clone the CEO or whoever the visionary is. Hopefully, it's the CEO, right? And then say to that person, you know, every employee in the company should have I don't know, a download of your brain, right? To be able to sort of align that purpose. What's an effective way to do that?
I think there's many different ways, depending on the company size. Like, I work with very, very, very large organizations. And what often happens is that the big vision from the chairman or the CEO doesn't actually filter down to the regions. So one of our companies we work with, their head office is in the US. And then we've got an Australian subsidiary who is a little bit, it's not the biggest focus. Let's just put it that way. Stay politically correct. The leaders are just like, well, we just basically do what we did last year. We just try our best. We've got a bigger budget. We've got, it's like, oh, really? So they actually don't necessarily know what the big vision is because it's just so diluted. In a smaller organization, it's a lot easier to get people rally together to communicate what's going on. And one of the ways that we also replace communication with some of the leaders that we work with is actually video updates every week. So instead of sending this long email that nobody reads or having 3-hour town halls that everyone hates to attend because it just goes through numbers, it's more, last week we got an amazing win with winning XYZ client, and this week is all about focusing on this conference. And, I'm excited how you bring it to life. It doesn't need to be long. It could be a minute. But you are more person because somebody sees you in action as the leader, but you also hear it firsthand rather than through the communications team that then translates it to the department heads that then put their own spin on it and filter down 7% of what was actually said to their team.
You've mentioned decision-making as a meta skill. What does that mean?
It means that you are not standing still to actually get things moving. And one of the leadership skills for 26 and beyond is to actually make a decision. And I always say there's 3 ways you can make a decision in that order. You make the right decision, tick in a box. You make the wrong decision, still tick in a box because that means you can pivot and change direction. The worst thing is that you don't make any decision. And with that, you kind of leave it to chance. And with the speed of change that we're currently facing, this is literally in a second you don't make a decision, you already fall behind because everyone makes mistakes. But if we don't gather the data, we don't know what actually works and what doesn't. So making a decision, go forward with it, gathering some data, and then reassess, is it still the right direction that we're heading into? Do we still do the right things to achieve our goals? This is something that we all have to do more of. However, because everyone's got so much pressure and everyone just is so much in the weeds, we often conveniently forget to do that. And this is, and at the same time, nobody wants to take responsibility. Like they don't want to say, I was the one who made the call and it wasn't quite the right thing. Comes down to psychological safety. Whereas if I say, we'll take that, I'm the owner of it. If something goes pear-shaped, I'll communicate it and then we'll come up with a solution as a team again. Even just communicating that it may as well fail. And, with Elon Musk, for example, like him or not, Elon Musk, when he sent the rocket in the sky and it exploded, it was a massive failure from a public perspective. However, he said, it's massive learning because now we know what works and what doesn't work. And this conviction, achieving the mission of being able to live on Mars or to at least explore space further is exactly what people buy into or not. And this is also what a strong person brand is. What do you stand for and what do you stand against? There's no right or wrong as such. People have their own beliefs, their own values, their own interests. And for those who say we need to explore space, they do whatever it takes to make that happen. For others, of course, they wouldn't even survive a day there. So even what he did with Twitter and X, again, was it the right decision or not? I don't know. And I'm not the one who should judge, but he made a decision and people folded. Some stayed, others left, and that's a good choice. In a second, I know what's expected, whether I agree with it or not, I can make a decision based on it. The worst thing is when I guess, and then I fill in the blanks with my own theories and stories, and that could be completely wrong. But if I don't get information from somebody else, this is also how rumors, unfortunately, come up, and then we've got office politics and chaos and anxieties and you name it.
Talking about decisions, I think Elon Musk is a really good example to show. So there's SpaceX, and there was also the other consortium that were the two vying for the NASA contracts. And the other company got more than, I think, double the money that SpaceX got given. But because he was willing to try and they blew up rockets, they're the ones who are going to the International Space Station. And the other one just isn't. I think they're dead in the water. And the other thing is, I think if we look at Elon Musk's net worth now, over 700, approaching 800 billion, you've got to say there's some benefit to being able to be willing to make a decision. So like you say, I think that willingness to make a decision is a massive benefit that people have got. But the flip side of that, the challenge is that people would rather not make a decision because there's that fear of being wrong. So how do we overcome that fear of making a mistake that people have?
It comes down to having also an organizational structure that supports it. And this is where I often talk about authority infrastructure. So it doesn't necessarily rely on the individual, it relies on the individual being able to make decisions in that particular context. Because if it just relies on my own gut feeling and my own experience, I'm again a dependency that a company doesn't want or shouldn't want, because if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, nobody else could make the decision. So that's obviously a massive bottleneck. What it comes down to is being able to gather the right information and also not waiting for having complete information. We don't have this luxury anymore that we know everything before we can make a decision. If we've got 67% of what we need to know to make the call, so be it. And then reassess, was it the right choice? But it also comes down to asking others for their input from their particular lens, not necessarily to slow things down and to delay the decision-making process, but to say, from a legal perspective, I don't understand anything from legal. Do we get in trouble for that? Or is there any issues? It just literally comes down to that.
Yeah, I had a very good project director at one point where he said, if you operate within the framework that's been given for you, then I can give you air cover. So we understood very well in which sort of realm we could operate.
Yes.
But he also trusted us to be able to make a decision. So I was head of quality, and if I made a quality-based decision, he saw me as the expert. So I had the trust in him that he had the trust in me, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And it was a really powerful place to operate in.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to talk about Framework Fridays. Can you tell us what that is?
Yes. So last year in 2025, I randomly decided to achieve or to work towards achieving a goal of doing 10 unassisted pull-ups. And I didn't think much of it that anyone would actually be interested in, because I had not been able to do one pull-up by 24, and I always had tried it. And then on the 18th of December 2024, I all of a sudden could do a pull-up. And I thought, must be a Christmas miracle. What if I do 10? 10 it is. And I documented my journey every month, gave an update. And people rallied behind it. They asked me at events, how many are we up to? I just got a video on LinkedIn from somebody in Norway asking how the pull-ups are going. There is a conversation point there, and people are interested in the process, not necessarily just in the outcome. And one of the frameworks that are also built in the trusted authorities, you can build credibility on the go, meaning rather than saying I know it all because I'm so experienced, I've seen everything. It's I don't know anything, but I'm trying, and this is what I'm doing to get there, and this I'm going through at the moment. I got my first board role. I don't know what I'm doing in my first board meeting, but this is how I prepare. I'll report back if it went well or not. And I applied the same principle on, as I said, a random pull-up challenge. Has nothing to do with my business, but it was a conversation started because we all know what it is, and a shared interest. And people literally from the woodworks came out that I hadn't spoken to in 10 years and said, how's the pull-up challenge going? And I thought, how can I replicate that for 26? Because with physical challenges, as I said, I don't want to be known as a fitness influencer or anything like that. So I don't want to overdo it either. And I thought,
So 100 pull-ups is off the cards.
Yes, it is for now. Maybe I'm working in the background on it.
Yeah.
But, especially when I don't want to be known for that, we also have to be mindful about being put in a box very quickly too, and or getting bored with that as well. And I thought, what other things is it that I'm doing and that I'm strongly a believer in? And I always say, if you can't draw it, you can't scale it. So if you can't make it so easy to explain what it is, what we're doing, how we need to do it, how we make decisions, you can't actually scale it across a team or department or organization. And I thought frameworks, it is. Demonstrate that whatever it is, there's a framework for it. And I even thought this morning, actually, in the shower, what if I register and don't tell anyone? There is a framework for it. So instead of there is an AI for it.com, there's a framework for it. And if you want to develop your theme of the year, which I developed a framework for a couple of weeks ago, you can go back to that. So instead of trying to constantly reinvent the wheel with whatever you're doing, you've got already a system that you can follow, and then you contextualize it to yourself. So this is a little challenge that I set myself. So I need to have 52 frameworks by the end of the year, but it's also thinking out loud. It's what I'm working on at the moment and see what resonates with people. One of the learnings that I've had so far already, and obviously we are just early February, and I've had 5 frameworks so far that I've shared, The first one went gangbusters with 50,000 impressions. It was shared 50 times. It was saved 200 times, good results. Anyway, it was fairly simple. It was literally a triangle with 2 bullet points on each side. Pretty much that was it. And then I thought, well, I need to amp it up. So clearly people are interested in it. And then the frameworks became too complex and too dense too early. I was like, people scroll through. This is not scroll through material anymore. So I have to dial back. And it's not, again, make it anything dumber. It's more, what is the most relevant thing that people can grasp? How can I visually demonstrate it rather than having a lot of text too, which I also did in a few frameworks. But yeah, I'm gathering data and insights too, because that is then the foundation to develop new programs, books, consultants, packages, and so forth.
Yeah, and I'd recommend anyone to have a look at your LinkedIn, because it seems to me like a smorgasbord of brain candy that you've put in there. So yeah,
I'm
it will
trying to
become one
think
of
out
your
loud and take people on the journey with me.
Yeah, very good. I want to round off a couple of things in terms of trust, because one of the things that people think about is, to become a trusted authority, I need to go and do loads of content. I need to get my TikTok channel running or something like that.
Yeah,
But you've got a different view on that.
absolutely. It does not come down to follower count or how big your audience is. It's about, are you trusted with the right people? And these people might be a group of 3. If you need to influence in your team or as a board, or, who are your decision makers who actually can open doors, who can make things happen, who can support you or sponsor you. And yes, social proof, having an online presence and footprint creates more credibility because we can see what the background is and so forth. However, we don't necessarily have to be constantly visible and post for the sake of it and trying to go viral with cute puppy videos that don't do anything for a career. So we optimize for trust, meaning I show you how I'm thinking, I show you how I work, I show you who I am, and then you make the call whether you want to work with me or like me, or you don't resonate with me. So I give you the option to be certain and confident that I'm the right choice for you, rather than me trying to push myself onto you and say, you need to buy this and we don't want to do that. No.
So it's about being authentic.
Mm.
That's the main thing. So it comes back to that trusted authority piece on connecting those dots that you've put out there for us. But in terms of that now, so taking that one step up to sort of the company level. So companies talk about branding. When they talk about we need to do better branding or better marketing, what do they get wrong with that?
They think if they've got a conversion problem, we just need to have a different font on something. So branding is not marketing and marketing is not sales. They all support each other, but simply having a different color in the font doesn't do anything. Brand, I always say, because it's the place and space that I'm playing in, is the unsexy part. You actually don't see anything straight away. But this is asking the tough questions. Why do we exist? What value do we bring? To whom do we bring this value? How do we differentiate ourselves? What's the personality that we want to get out there? What's the feeling that we want to evoke? There are so many questions to ask, and you often don't necessarily have the answers either. And it takes a little bit of a discovery process. Once we've got that, then we bring it to life. And this is where marketing comes in. So now we've got a headline, we've got an about me. We can play around fonts that best represent what we actually want to stand for. We can talk about visuals, we can talk about social media content and so forth. But because it's not as sexy to do this groundwork, people are going straight into the marketing or even worse, the advertising space. So we just put a lot of money towards whatever and it will solve the problem. No, it doesn't. Customers are a lot more skeptic than ever before. Trust is low, which means the conversion cycles, B2B, B2C, doesn't matter. They're all longer. People take a lot longer to actually make a decision because their BS rate is high. So again, what it comes down to is going back to basics. Are we still doing the right thing? Do we still provide value in this different context that we are playing now? And if not, what do we need to change? Do we need to reposition? Do we need to repackage? Do we need to simply update to make it more contemporary? So there's 2 different ways how you can rebrand, and not everything has to be a complete revamp of what you've done, but it could be a refinement. So if we've always worked, one of our clients is a business broker and they've always worked with businesses under $1 million. And now they said 5 million should be the baseline because we've got more experience, we've got more tools, we've got more processes. But that requires a different, not just appearance, but a different experience for those clients. Like a $5 million plus business expects a different service, support, professionality than a less than $1 million business. So that needs to come down in all the touch points that the future customer sees. and experiences.
So how does an institution build trust? Because we're seeing, and I think you're one of the people who's mentioned that trust is moving from institutions to individuals, but yet an institution also needs to build trust. That seems to be a bit of a clash. What's best for companies to do in that space?
Well, you're spot on. The trust moves from institutions to individuals. An Edelman Trust Barometer has shown that trust is at an all-time low in all the institutions, government, education, including
Why is that?
CEOs. Because there have been too many promises and not enough delivery of those promises. Or trust breaches have just been through the roof of the last few years. Same with education. We've bought into the idea, I just need to pay for a $100,000 degree and then I get a good job. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't work like that anymore. So we don't necessarily trust that what they're selling me, the degree, will actually get me what I want, a safe job. So it comes from there. And at the same time, because we've got more access to information now, we are more informed than ever before. So technology has leveled the play field when it comes to accessing information, getting different opinions, and being able to learn from others, which means that the quickest way how we can build/rebuild trust as an institution or organization is by showcasing personal brands. So you see more and more organizations focusing on pushing their C-suite or their leadership team to build their own personal profile, maybe through small speaking engagements, like local meetups. Again, it doesn't need to be massive events. I need to be there where my audience is. And I hosted an Angular meetup for years, very niche, very nerdy, but exactly the kind of candidates that we wanted to nurture. So that was kind of a tick in the box. So it's more about how can you leverage individuals who can build trust with a certain audience, and everyone's got a different target audience and group, that we can then fast track the company trust. And especially with organizations in more emerging industries like cryptocurrency, where trust is low to start with because I can't necessarily touch it. I don't know what it's doing. People explaining what it actually means in layman's terms and being credible because they've got some kind of finance background and can actually explain why we should trust or why we should invest or not. That helps the organization to be chosen as the go-to.
So are people more trusting of individuals than institutions? So we know no one's perfect, but do people accept that individuals are more likely to fail and that's fine rather than institutions?
I don't think it's more likely to fail, and this is why we forgive them. It's more we've built enough goodwill that when something bad happens, people forgive us more. Whereas an organization, our perception is they just want to make money. They just want to take advantage of us. And who even is the organization? You also see on LinkedIn, for example, that company page engagement is completely down, tanking, not existent. Like even large followings with 1,000 followers get a like or 2 likes. Clearly shows that, like, I would never engage with a company page because who is even the company? Is it an intern? Is it automated bot? I don't know. It's not worth my time. So we're defaulting to who would I trust? Who am I looking for advice or translation, what that actually means? If the market goes up, what does it mean to me as an investor if we stay with the cryptocurrency example? If it goes down, do I have to sell? Do I need to buy? I'm looking for somebody who can translate what they know based on their insights and their proximity to that industry to my language, being a novice in that space and having no idea, but a lot of fear. So this is how we can not necessarily build goodwill, but build a trusted brand as a business represented by individuals.
So Petra, how does an organization stay relevant, or an individual?
It comes down to what I always refer as skill stacking. So instead of relying on the basic technical skills as the one and be all, it's how can that become our foundation to then build on top of that skills that elevate those particular skills. So let's say we are an accountancy and we are great doing account management or financial accounting. However, that's not enough anymore. How can I become a thought leader in my space? How can I translate industry insights into plain language that my customer base or future customer base can understand? How can I develop a community where people actually want to be part of? So then when we do have something to sell and launch, they're already more brand advocates for it. So it's again rethinking what does your value actually look like in the market, and is it still what sets you apart, or has it become a commodity like most professions? these days? And then what can we do to create more value? And sometimes it's speed. How can I turn around whatever I'm doing, not in a week, but in 24 hours, if I know this is a critical factor and nobody else does it yet? So yeah, it's rethinking what value creation actually looks like and responding in a way that also connects and resonates with the brand that we want to stand for and what the market wants.
Petra, in terms of organization planning, we talk about the growth of an organization and then the transition between it becoming a bigger business and then succession. So how does an organization maintain that culture when it's going through these phases and different people in leadership come in?
I don't necessarily think that a business focuses or should focus on sustaining the exact culture, because being a team of 5 is a very different dynamic than being a team of 30. And we have to take that in consideration. We also need to create space for those 30 people to contribute to cultures. Often people say, is it a cultural fit? I was like, this is the wrong question to ask. Is it a cultural contribution? That's the right question to ask. And this is, again, where diversity also comes into play. If we're just hiring people who think the same, who look the same, who have the same level of skills, we're going to stagnate very, very quickly. Whereas if we have got somebody who is more of a disruptor and having complementing, that's a big difference to different, complementing skill sets with same values but different personalities, now we can create something of value. And also reassessing, are the people in the seats still the right people for where we want to go next? Because as we said before, progressing, not necessarily just upwards but also sideways, requires different skills and personality traits, and not everyone fits for this next stage. Like, to grow a business or to start a business is a different skill set than you need to scale and to exit a business. And if I've never exited a multi-million-dollar business, I may not be the best person to lead that transaction. It may be better to step sideways and support the marketing team or whatever it might be. So even when we work in the 360 with growing companies, there is a clause in there when we get them funding that there's usually the founder, who is also CEO for the first 12 to 18 months, gets reviewed after the first 12 months and then every 6 months after, if they're still the right person for being a CEO, or if somebody else should come in and they move into a CTO or CMO or Chief Product Officer or Chief Sales Officer, because that's more their skill. And this is what got them here, but it won't get them any further. Also, removing the ego from, I need to have that CEO title or whatever title it is, and say, where can I contribute best with my skills? And then if we wanted to create a title around it.
I kind of feel if a company's got that mission very well documented, then that's quite an easy thing to do, because without that mission, it's almost like everyone exists to butter the ego of the CEO. Whereas, we can then ask an objective question: is the CEO the best person to fulfill the mission?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Petra, for people to get in touch with you, where should they go?
Best place to start is LinkedIn. It's still my second home. I'm still very active. I share my thoughts, and best way to get to know what I'm thinking, how I'm thinking, and if it resonates. And for any more details and how we can work together, connect with CCC.com.
Amazing. Petra, thank you. It's been wonderful having you on board. I think it's a real talent to be able to look into people. Like you said, you're the person looking into the jar, telling them what they like when they don't see that. And to see the talent that someone's got and to be able to bring that out, and also to identify within organizations what it is that they need and to be able to address that need. I think that's tremendous, because that gives value to the organization itself. It gives people a mission that they want to work on. But I think it also does a world of good for their customers. So tremendous. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the conversation.